he's going to go ahead and introduce everybody on our panel.
Yeah, I'm pleased to have this larger group. We planned this for October, knowing that the metro changes would be in place, that some of the roadway infrastructure improvements that we've gone through the last couple of years are nearly finished. So we thought it was a good time to revisit the transportation world in West Seattle. So we're awaiting Tom Rasmussen. We're not going to wait for him, but he is on the agenda. He confirmed that he would be here. So our panel consists of the Seattle Department of Transportation Director, Peter Hahn. Victor Obeso is the Director of Service Development for Metro. Chris Arkills is the Transportation Advisor to Dow Constantine for not just Metro, but transportation in general. Martin Duke is the Executive Editor for the Seattle Transit blog, which is basically the third-party public entity which sits over all of our transit issues, if you will, daily blogging on what's good, what's bad, what's not. The format this evening, we've given these folks, including Tom if he shows up within the time frame, anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes to have them give us a sort of a summary of their world. Peter obviously having to do with infrastructure, things like that. Victor obviously with Metro. The reason Chris is here has to do with high capacity transit and plans for the future, not only Metro but other plans. Martin is basically third party review, sort of a, I'm going to call it an independent assessment of things. Martin's been on many of the same transit advisory boards, et cetera, that I have, that Peter and others have. So a trusted individual in my opinion. So Peter, if you'll start.
So I'm going to start with Arkland comments about coal. So you didn't ask me to talk about that, but you reminded me. So I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, the mayor wrote a letter to the Port Commission, and he expressed many of the things that we just said to you 5 minutes ago, and asked us, the department, to take on a study of what these trains are going to do. And I think it's 9 coming, 9 going, 20 minutes plus, and really impacting the city on that. So I just wanted you to be aware of that if you wanted the port to become more of a partner and not just kind of, oh, it's okay, kind of like being more aligned with things you said. Also, as holding the office of SDOT Director, I'm on what's called the blue, there I go, I said it wrong, the Green Ribbon Commission, not Blue Ribbon Commission, the Green Ribbon Commission, which deals with climate change. And not that long ago, we had our group recommendations on transportation, and I threw in Coltrane. Hey, we're going to say something about Coltrane. It's a big deal, and we're not sure that's such a good idea, and I forget how it was worded. I'm not even sure they're done. So that topic is receiving the proper amount of attention in a number of places, including my department. So, just to review for you, as a Department of Transportation, we are responsible for infrastructure that together amounts to a value of about $13 billion. The amount of land that's occupied by SDOT transportation infrastructure amounts to about a quarter of the city land area, which is a fair amount. We have 2,400 miles of residential streets, 1,500 miles of arterials. We have over 100 bridges. We have tons of walls, stairs, sidewalks, and on and on and on. So obviously, as you know, that kind of infrastructure deteriorates over time, just like your own physical infrastructure deteriorates over time, and that it takes a certain amount of maintenance expenditure on an annual basis to keep it up to snuff. So we've been at it, analyzing what we have, looking at life cycle costs carefully. And by all accounts, and I remember pretty sharply a presentation that council staff made to the council last, I think it was July of 2011, where they agreed with the conclusion that our maintenance, to replace our infrastructure at a reasonable rate would take on the order of well over $1 billion a year, and to maintain it appropriately would be on the order of $141 million a year, and I don't know if we hit much more than $35 million a year. I think it's widely recognized by anybody who's looked at it, SDOT, council staff, council, others, that we just don't have enough money to do a really thorough job. So that remains a struggle. Another theme that's a major issue along the same concern is that bridging the gap, which in a couple of months will reach the end of its 6th year. That's 6 out of 9. So we'll be a full 2/3 through the Bridging the Gap program, and absent some action in year 8 or year 9, and you can either one, there will not be a year 10 absent something that you collectively and all the people and the rest of the city action that's taken. So that's a huge deal, and the generosity of the city residents has been recognized and has been implemented well, but it ends absent an action by all of you. We've certainly made some improvements, I would say considerable level, and I have a long list because Chaz gave me some very detailed questions. But, for example, we just recently opened bids on Delridge and Delridge repaving, and we have a good company, and we have pretty good bids. And the last couple of years, we've been going out and paving more in the neighborhoods, more than we had previously. Deliberately, the paving money was first spent downtown, knowing that with viaduct construction, there will be more traffic diverted onto city streets. And those city streets came first and that they would be ready on time. But last year or the year before, we started stepping out to the residential neighborhoods, and we've done more work. This year, for example, we did 85th. Last year, we did 15th. We did Ravenna this year. In this neighborhood, we did California from Admiral to Edmonds in 2006. We did Admiral from 41st to Olga in 2006. Admiral the 3300 block in 2012. Fauntleroy, Alaska to Holly, 2009. Genesee from 48th to 53rd, 2010. Sylvan Way, Orchard and Dumark Way near Home Depot in 2011. And 35th Avenue from Myrtle to Othello in 2011. We've made some improvements on Beach Drive down at the 5900, 6000 block. There are improvements that needed to be made. There's a delicately sliding, vulnerable section of hillside that has had a number of legal issues which appear to be getting resolved, and there appears to be a solution underway that will stabilize that hillside. And in anticipation of that, we've done some paving on both sides of the slide, and when the slide repair is completed, we'll also do some spot repairs right next to the slide area. So we're making some considerable headways. And I'm going to stop because I haven't looked at the clock carefully, but I'm probably way ahead of my 5 to 8 minutes. But a lot of our improvements are also coordinated very closely with our fellow departments in really all the transit agency, but certainly Metro more than anybody else, where you know that buses can only move if they have good roadways and good signals to move. And bus rapid transit is not rapid if you don't have the right lane configurations and you can have a reliable, consistent service. So we work very carefully on all aspects of planning the bus rapid ride routes, which are obviously C is the one for here, and then it becomes D as it goes to Ballard. And so we work closely, and any questions that come up, I'll be certainly ready to respond to that. And that's a very important part of our work. Another important part of the work that's embedded in the various questions that Chaz teed up for us is thinking ahead. So we have a terrific bus system, we have BRT, and then years from now, we may well be asked to participate in another sound transit round, and we want to make sure that we look at all the opportunities for having a transit system that'll be in place in 10 years from now or 15. It takes a huge amount of time to plan and then implement a transit system. When Sound Transit was voted on in 1996, the first line to the airport didn't open until July of 2009. Give or take 13 years. That's a pretty long time. So you gotta, it's not something you could do quickly. It's also not frequently scalable. It's not like doing sidewalks. I could do 100 blocks of sidewalks, or I could do 1 block of sidewalks. I don't have to do them all at once. Transit, you often have to plan in big chunks. So with that, I think the way over, although it's only 15 after, and I'll let others speak, and I'll be happy to participate later.
Certainly. Tom, just for your benefit, since you got stuck in traffic.
Well, something like that.
Each of our panelists are giving sort of a brief overview.
Okay.
And then when we're finished, we're going to open it up to a dialogue. So you would be following us.
Thank you.
So Victor, thank you.
Thanks, Jess. I'm Victor Obeso, Manager Service Development, King County Metro. And I'm sure a lot of you are out here tonight to talk to us about our service changes that we made a couple of weeks ago. I will try to elevate my voice, thank you. I want to give you some background that I think is important to provide some context, and certainly want to respond to your questions this evening. In terms of background, we have been providing service in West Seattle for decades, obviously, and the patterns of service have been there for those decades. And many of you have built your daily travel or commutes or whatever purpose you might be getting around on the bus system for around the patterns that we've had in existence. And we've just made the most comprehensive and significant changes at one time than we've ever made in a service change before. So I recognize that for many of you it represents a significant change and upheaval to your travel. We have been working over the last several years to improve and provide more service for West Seattle in our transit system. One of the impetuses for that and some of the resources that we've had to provide that is actually as a result of the project to replace the Alaskan Way Viaduct. We've had a contract with WashDOT since 2009, where we began service in 2010, in which WashDOT is reimbursing Metro for the addition of trips to the West Seattle system, a few trips to the Northwest Seattle system, and a significant number of hours that have added to time in our schedules to account for the delays that are caused by the construction projects that have been occurring. So we have made over the last several years investments using WashDOT dollars in the Route 54 to increase the number of trips that it's providing beginning in 2010 and into the fall of 2011. In 2011, Metro actually made its its planned rapid ride service investment of approximately 19,000 annual service hours. And that number doesn't necessarily mean anything to you. That's how we count service on an annual basis. The plan originally had been to implement rapid ride in the fall of 2011. Given the planned impacts to the travel environment in the Alaskan Way Viaduct on First Avenue, we proposed to defer the full implementation of rapid ride for a year, what you're seeing this fall. But we agreed to implement the hours of service that Metro had budgeted for rapid ride in the fall of 2011. So one of the aspects that's occurring this fall is you're not seeing that investment as new because we made it a year ago. And between the state's investments and Metro's investments in additional trips, and the state is still supporting approximately 22 peak period trips on West Seattle routes today through that contract. We saw a 22% increase in ridership between spring of 2009 and the spring of 2012. So we saw a very healthy ridership growth, in part because people didn't want to drive through that traffic, and in part because we were offering better levels of service to West Seattle. And that's a very healthy level of growth. In that period, the Metro system grew approximately 6% in its ridership. So the West Seattle ridership was growing at about 3 times the rate. Last year, many of you might recall, last summer, we were having a conversation with the community and our King County Council, and earlier than that, the state legislature, over the potential need to reduce the metro system by upwards of 20%. And in the summer of 2011, the King County Council adopted what's referred to as the congestion reduction charge, a $20 license fee. That is an interim 2-year fee to support and sustain Metro for 2 additional years. We still face the financial cliff, if you will, of that revenue source going away, and the potential that we will still need to reduce our system in late 2014, 2015, and beyond. But what happened when that congestion reduction charge was passed was the council asked us to go forward and begin to implement our new strategic plan to look at every dollar that Metro spends on transit and try to maximize its productivity over time. Given that we were implementing the C and D lines this year, we looked at this area as an area to reorganize the system, both to integrate with that new service, and we had a charge to go out and find efficiencies in the system. Now, West Seattle was one area, Northwest Seattle another, but earlier than that, early in the year, we eliminated 11 routes, reduced 7 others in other parts of King County. So places like Newcastle, Federal Way, Kent, Southeast Seattle have seen, Magnolia have seen reductions or losses of service that were less productive. They didn't, for each hour a bus was on the road, it was not carrying very many passengers, and essentially in the bottom 25% of our system. So as we've reorganized this West Seattle system, we were looking at those places that were not carrying as many people as others. We've made many different changes, but our objective was both to implement the rapid ride service at its planned levels every 10 minutes in the peak periods, at least every 15 minutes throughout the day. And I think a key factor in our objective in designing rapid ride is to provide a 7-day-a-week frequent corridor operating 20 hours a day that is available to the West Seattle residents, the Ballard residents, the downtown residents who live along its corridor. So we see it as a 7-day-a-week frequent transit corridor. We recognize that the problems, many of the problems that have been occurring are occurring in the peak commute period. As we implemented a change this large, there are several dynamics, and if you heard any of our messages before the service change, we were asking our riders to be patient with us. We know that in making a large service change, and we've made changes like this around our metro system, the creation of the Route 120 in 2005 was on the Del Ridge corridor, was part of a similar consolidation of lower productivity services, the establishment of a very frequent corridor where the most people live, work, and travel to concentrate services. That change involved 12 or 15 routes, not the 50 routes that these major changes involved, with another 30 with minor changes. So we ask people to be patient because we know it takes a while for our operators to get to know their new routes and their new assignments. Anytime we make a change to an operator's route, a route that's never operated before, or major changes to an existing route, it takes a while for operators to become accustomed to it and to kind of get into the rhythm of driving that route. We very much know that for our riders, it takes a while for our riders to understand what all of their options might be for making the trips they want to make, for traveling at the times that works for them, and at the times and places and buses on our system where they can find a place to sit or stand on the bus. We, in our first few days of operation, it was not a good scene out here in West Seattle. We fully recognize that. And we know that we experienced significant high loads in the peak period. We know that we were passing some people up at stops. That is not our desire. That is not our design for service. And we, within the first week, we're putting in place 2 standby coaches for rapid ride to add trips in the peak periods, morning and afternoon. And by Monday of last week, we had permanently added 2 additional buses to the rapid ride schedule for both the C and D line to provide additional trips in the morning, 2 additional peak period trips in the morning, 2 additional in the afternoon on both the C and the D line. When we made these changes, we maintained a reserve of service resources. Those added 2 buses and trips on our rapid ride lines used up about 25% of our available reserve. We do still have some of that reserve available to make further adjustments. And we are, while things have smoothed out over the 10 or 12 days that we've had of operation of this route, weekdays, but we know it can get better. We know that there are places in our network where we may need to add additional trips to alleviate the high loads. And that might include more trips on our rapid ride line. That might include more trips on a route like 55. We're also seeing kind of throughout this West Seattle network a bump in ridership again. So we've seen that ridership growth over 3 years. With the beginning of this service change, we're seeing what we think is a significant bump again. We're still collecting data on that. Our counts for routes getting on and off the viaduct, passenger counts are 25% higher than they were last spring. Now that's not daily ridership, that's just a measure of how full those buses are. But it is representative, we believe, of a fairly significant uptick in ridership that's occurred. So we're working to assess all of those changes. We're working to smooth out our operations, and we're working to put more capacity where it is most needed. I'm going to stop there because I know you're going to have a wide range of questions, and I'll be happy to stay as long as you need me to.
Thank you. Chris?
Hi, I'm the Transportation Policy Advisor for King County Executive Dow Constantine. I'm also a West Seattle resident, moved out here 18 years ago. So I have experienced a lot of the same things you've experienced, both on our roadways with the viaduct construction and in terms of bus service. I have been passed by a 120 or a rapid ride coach that was too full to load me and had to wait for another bus. So I share your frustration and your pain. I will say, as Victor said, that every day we learn and to make the system better. It was an enormous adjustment for, if you can imagine, 3,000 drivers who've been doing the same thing every day with a ride-free area and not collecting fares downtown, and then switching to a new way of doing life. And the same thing for our 400,000 daily riders. It was a huge learning curve for all of us. And we can train people, and we can try and prepare them for it, but until you get into the real world, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. It's and I've seen an improvement every day in the quality of our bus service as we learn. We have, a lot of people say Metro doesn't care about people, but I have never seen a more caring bunch of individuals than the Metro service planners and staff. People really do care about their mission, which is moving people as much as possible. But I will say that becomes more challenging every day. We're changing as a society. This city grew up in the automobile age. And for a long time that worked pretty well for us. But we're not building any new freeways. We're not building any new streets. We're trying to figure out how to make the road network that we have work best for transit, for bicycles, and for automobiles. And that's presenting a lot of challenges. Some people might not like curb bulbs on their streets that allow buses to load easier, but they allow buses to move people. This city is going to face more and more of those challenges as we move forward. Already, more people get on the Columbia Street on-ramp downtown on a bus than they get on than drive in a car every day. Gives you an indication of how important transit is. And as Victor just said, transit has been growing at a much higher pace in West Seattle, in part because of our construction difficulties. Chaz asked me to talk. I'm happy to answer any questions about bus service or the water taxi or anything else. All right. I just got the time signal, but I'm happy to talk about. No.
No, I'm not running the show. I was just giving you a timeout, to give you a pause, because I have comments about the water tax.
Okay.
We're going to take
I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I apologize.
And no problem. I thought you were the timer. You know? Okay. Chaz asked me to talk about high-capacity transit. We had two opportunities in the late 60s, early 70s to build light rail, heavy rail actually, in this region, and the voters voted that down at the time, despite the fact that the federal government was paying 90% of the cost. Now they only pay a fraction of the cost of any light rail line, and it's very competitive. Sound Transit does have study money for both Ballard and West Seattle light rail in the ST2 plan that was passed in 2008. The city has made a decision to advance money to Sound Transit to forward those Ballard studies and make them faster. They did not choose to do so for West Seattle, in part because West Seattle is going to be a more expensive place to build rail to. You've got an enormous crossing of the Duwamish, you've got to cross the railroad tracks in Soto, and we have a lot of crazy topography in West Seattle that other areas don't have. So it is an enormous challenge. We looked at Rapid Ride as a good intermediate step. When you're building a light rail line costs in the billions of dollars. We can bring Rapid Ride online in the millions of dollars. And it is not light rail. It is not a dedicated pathway. It is not a high capacity transit like a train that can carry 800 people. But it is something that we can deliver and implement, and we hope to grow. And I think the next, widely recognized, if we're allowed to build more Rapid Ride lines after these 6 ones, one of the absolute top candidates is the 120 line through Delridge. It's one of the, I believe, 10 busiest buses in the system now, and is ideally suited for that. I will stop there because I'd really rather take questions tonight than give long speeches, but just want you to know Executive Constantine is very concerned about both the bus service changes and the long-range future, and is committed towards working towards another Sound Transit package to bring more high-capacity transit, allow us to redistribute the money we spend on buses to better serve neighborhoods. So with that, I'll stop.
Tom?
Thank you, Chaz. Chaz and I saw each other about a week ago, I guess it was. We were with a group that was walking through the Fauntleroy Creek area.
Great nature walk.
Yeah, it was a great nature walk. I often go with community groups to visit their neighborhoods, understand what the concerns are, and this is one of the fun ones in a beautiful afternoon. I'm Tom Rasmussen. I chair the Transportation Committee of the Seattle City Council, and I live here in West Seattle. I've chaired the Transportation Committee now for 2 years, going on 3. I'll be ending my 3rd year at the end of this year as the chair of the City Council's Transportation Committee. And what I've really had to focus on, because I know Peter really has given a good summary of this to you, is trying to ensure that we continue to maintain our streets and our roads as best we can, given the fact that we're losing so much money that was traditionally devoted to street maintenance and repair. When we adopted the budget for 2011 and 2012, my recommendation, the City Council added $5 million and more a year for maintenance and repair, and for bicycle-related improvements for freight mobility and pedestrian safety. But that's a drop in the bucket in terms of the hundreds of millions of dollars that we need every year for maintenance and repair and the operation of our streets and our roads and our system. So the other thing that I did was to lead the City Council on the creation of what we call a Transportation Benefit District. And this is a new way of taxing ourselves within the City of Seattle, specifically for transportation-related improvements. This was fairly recently allowed by the state legislature. All our power to tax and do things in the city comes from the state legislature. So we created the district, and the state allowed us to enact a $20 vehicle license fee. So when you and I renew our driver's license or our license plate tab, we pay an additional $20, and that goes specifically to transportation improvements in Seattle. The other thing I did, well, the council did. I never do anything alone. You always have to get 5 votes and a signature by the mayor. But as the chair of the Transportation Committee, we went to you, the voters, about a year ago with a measure. Chaz helped to lead this effort that would raise an additional $60 on the vehicle license fee, which would have raised about $40 to $50 million a year for maintenance and repair and for our transportation system. But the voters said no, and they said no pretty resoundingly. The reason why we asked for that significant increase is that the state hasn't given us many options to raise money for our transportation system. Vehicle license fee is one, tolling roads is another, but we haven't gotten to that point where the city will be tolling its roads. And there are a few others such as sales tax and other things. But with those limited funds, we're doing the very best we can. But I'm not focusing only at the city level also, but I'm working with our leaders in Olympia because, as I said earlier, all of our authority to tax and to make changes to how we pay for our transportation system comes from Olympia. And we did have some success for Metro. Chris talked about, and Victor, I think to a certain extent, they've talked about the commute reduction charge. This is a way of helping to or congestion reduction charge. Anyway, this is a way to fund Metro. It's a $20 vehicle license fee in all of King County. And we had to get that permission from the state legislature, but that permission only lasts for 2 years. If that permission goes away, that fee goes away, and then Metro will be facing with a very, very serious reduction in service to all of us. So we're going back to Olympia to ask for another way of funding Metro, because if you think service is being cut now, and my route has been cut, the number 37, thank you, Metro. I don't have my service anymore. But if you think the reduction in service is bad now, if we don't get a new way of funding Metro Transit, we're really going to be hurting because our funding depends upon sales gas tax and other sales tax, and all of that has been declining during the recession and is not anticipated to improve anytime soon. So finding ways of funding the system that serves you and me has been one of my major responsibilities. But I also view myself as a voice for people in this community. I drive the roads, I ride the buses, and I share my experience with Peter Hahn or Kevin Desmond, the head of Metro, whenever it's appropriate to do so. Peter knows I have his cell phone number on my cell phone. And I'll say, Peter, why is this detour route so badly marked? Why don't we do a better job so we can move faster? And he'll take care of it. Or I'll email Kevin, as I did last week, about my experience riding the rapid ride D line, saying what my experience was, what my recommendation would be for improvements. And I sent that to Mr. Desmond. I sent it to some of you who wrote me, as well as to the West Seattle blog, and that was published. And my understanding is that other than the great winter snowstorm that paralyzed us, the change to the rapid ride line, the D line, had more comments on the West Seattle blog than any other subject, I think, since their beginning, since their creation. So almost at the top. That's how important transit is to all of us, and how we've been affected by transit and the rapid ride D line. When I get down into the specifics of bike lanes here in West Seattle, Beach Drive, you know, that was a mess for how long? So it was a nightmare for anyone who would drive it, for bicyclists, for pedestrians, because it was so narrow and it was so broken up. And we were doing all we could to resolve the legal issues, which were complex first, and then once those were resolved, to begin to patch and repair that road. And then once the retaining wall is built, then the rest of the road will be repaired so it's much smoother and safer for all of us to drive on. Pedestrian safety is incredibly important for people. I've met with people in the Delridge community a number of times along 35th Avenue Southwest, and here in the junction, particularly in the Fauntleroy, what we call now the Fauntleroy Triangle, immediately to the east of us. The roads are fast. People speed through there. Tens of thousands of vehicles going to the ferry terminal, going down Delridge or up 35th. And we're really working to try to improve pedestrian safety and crossing with speed cameras and with better pedestrian crossings. We have a study going on now for Fauntleroy to try to make that a safer street to cross. We have people here who have disabilities and who are blind and want to be able to cross that street. This is going to be a major residential neighborhood, and we have to be ready in terms of safety for pedestrians who want to cross, go to the Trader Joe's and to other stores and shopping up here in the junction. I've also heard from the neighborhood around here about the importance of parking planning. We have to plan for parking because they're concerned that people who come to this neighborhood to ride the Rapid D line are going to be parking in their neighborhoods, and we have to have a plan to deal with that. So that is underway now, and the Department of Transportation is completing some recommendations in terms of how to improve parking in this neighborhood so that for those who either drive here or who live here can live together more successfully. I'm amazed at the number of people who have turned out tonight. I brought information for you, but I only have 20 copies. Because I thought, well, on a Monday night, rainy night like this, at the most we'll have 20 people here. So I'm really, really impressed and appreciative of your interest. And I know that you have a lot of questions to ask, so I won't talk any further. This is just kind of an introductory remark about what I've been doing and so much more. But if you want to share these with each other, this is what I have. It shows basically how SDOT has been spending its money, where it's been spending its funds, particularly from the major source that we have now, which is bridging the gap. So that's really specific information. So thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you.
Thank you. And now Martin Duke, Seattle Transit Blog Executive Editor, sort of on the shoulder of all of these folks' view of transportation in West Seattle.
Well, Chaz, I'm going to let you down. I mean, you probably invited me on here because I don't answer anybody and I can throw grenades at what my colleagues panel just said. But I actually really can't disagree with a lot. But I would like to say that about 18 months ago, last time I came here, I think I was cautiously optimistic about the future of transit in Seattle. And in the past 18 months, that's been replaced with something more like absolute despair. Let me discuss why. First of all, the good news, Sound Transit. Sound Transit 2 is doing its thing. It's getting rail built. Although the revenues are very much down, as everyone else's are due to the recession, and very much below their projections, they put so much cushion in a lot of these projects that almost all of it is likely to be delivered very close to the years they scheduled to deliver it. So that's the good news. The bad news is they are right on the knife edge of starting to have to make major cuts. And if things get much worse, there's this atmosphere of austerity. They might have to cut corners on things like station design. And those are the kinds of things that we're going to end up regretting for 100 years. When the station is too far from where the people are, when the bus transfers aren't very easy to do because you have to economize on these kinds of things. It's something that we're watching a lot on the blog and something that is something to be concerned about. The other problem is that Sound Transit, to build Sound Transit 2, has used all of the taxing authority that the state has given it. And that taxing authority will continue to be dedicated to paying off the bonds until into the 2030s, depending on how some of the projections work out. So one way of putting this is, I'm 36 years old. I believe I'm able to retire in 2044. And if you ask me to bet, is there going to be a rail station within walking distance of here when I retire? I would bet no. Now, that's a probability, not a certainty. There are some options if the state got serious about extending that revenue authority, so Sound Transit go back to the voters faster, as a number of leaders in the county and at Sound Transit have expressed desire to do, then we could get this done faster. Now, as some people have hinted, Ballard is probably first in line for the next big rail line in the city of Seattle for a bunch of reasons. But if the package is big enough, we would probably do both at the same time, both Ballard and West Seattle. Now, I've seen no interest at the state level whatsoever in doing this. So I think it's a tough hill to climb. I mean, even getting Metro the money to preserve their current level of service is a hard sell down there. So a substantial new tax that add new capabilities seems to be just out of the question at the moment. Maybe the environment will change. There are some grassroots efforts to bring this up on the agenda. There's a group called SeattleSubway.org that a friend of mine runs, and they have a long uphill climb. But if you want to get involved in that kind of thing, I think that's a good place to start. Now, since the rail outlook is such a long-term one, one other thing that our blog spends a lot of time reporting on and advocating for is the effort to make buses as awesome as they can be. Now, as I think Chris said, we're not pouring billions and billions of dollars into right-of-ways. You're not going to have all these elevated guideways and tunnels and things like rail has. But there are a lot of other features you can put into a bus line. You can have off-board payment, so when there are 30 people at the stop, it doesn't take 4 minutes everyone to get on. They can all get on all the boards, on all the doors. All kind real-time arrival at stations, very frequent service, and signal priority, transit lanes where you need them, that kind of thing. Now, Rapid Ride is a step in the right direction, and I'm glad that Metro has done that. And I'm glad the voters approved the funding for that in 2006. It has some of those elements, but it's not really where I think it could be. And part of that is the funding situation. And again, you know, this has been going down to Olympia for 3 or 4 years now as an issue on the agenda, and it keeps dying there for a variety of reasons. And I'm concerned that even if they finally do get it through all the gridlock down there, it might get coupled to a big roads and highway package. And if it does, there will be a lot of environmental opposition, which in my view is pretty much justified, and the whole thing might go down as a package, in which case we're still in the same boat we are with Metro. Now, obviously, if we have a big cut in Metro's revenue, service is just going to get worse across the board. But even if it remains sort of flat, you know, one place where I'm somewhat critical of Metro is that I don't think they have really prioritized all those features of awesome buses that you could have at relatively low cost. And you know, it's hard for them to do. And by Metro, I don't necessarily mean Victor. I mean, he's obviously a piece of the machine. He has a boss, and there's a King County executive, and there's a King County council that likes to get into the weeds of route structuring. So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and not all of them are good actors in my view. But you know, we have 6 rapid ride lines. I would much rather they had built 5 rapid ride lines and made those 5 awesome than have 6 with some of the features that we like to see, but not, you know, not off-board payment all over the system. Not some, you know, we have people paying cash on rapid ride buses, which makes them slow. And if we're moving to a system, Metro is trying to move to a system, and they're right to do this, where instead of a zillion buses going downtown from every corner of West Seattle, people go to interface points with a major trunk line that runs all the time, very super frequently, which is supposed to be the rapid ride line. But when you have lots of people boarding at every station, that's when it becomes very, very critical to have these kinds of systems so that everyone can get on simultaneously without slowing everything down. But really the biggest issue is funding, and the legislature's been really out to lunch on that. The last item is at the city level. Tom already talked about the vehicle license fee. And that really is one of my greatest sources of despair. That was a $200 million package. $100 million of it, or half, was for bus improvements to make the buses run faster, for signal priority, you know, queue jumps, and that kind of thing. Improving stations, adding real-time arrival, off-board payment. So a lot of the rest was for paving streets, which I think is pretty uncontroversial for people. And then there was a little bit for bikes and a little bit for streetcar planning. That went down for a lot of reasons, I think. I don't know what was in the hearts of voters, but I think part of it was to send a message that they didn't like regressive taxes. Part of it, I think people just wanted to keep the $60. And part of it, people just maybe didn't understand the package. But I really thought that Seattle voters, say nothing about the region, but city of Seattle voters thought transit was a priority more than these other, you know, sending messages and so on. And so if we have to fight this kind of battle in the city of Seattle, then going to the Sound Transit District, which includes outlying areas of Pierce County, to Homish County, and you know, even at the metro level out into Winning Woods and Carnation and Fall City and Federal Way, feels like a really difficult uphill climb. Now, maybe that was just a bad election and a bad cycle, and we'll do better next time. But I think there's reason to be pessimistic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, let's go to questions and try and be reasonable. You know, I'll go from one side to the other. So, John first.
Hi, my name is John Grant. I live in Arbor Heights. So last week, or actually with a big shakeup, Arbor Heights lost a lot of its service. Last week, I started an online petition, change.org, and I sent it over to West Seattle blog, and they put it as part of their little Friday morning transit update. Within the next 24 hours, I got over 100 signatures on my petition. And basically what we're asking for is to return more bus service, especially off-peak hours, to the Arbor Heights loop. Currently, I walked home from Barden 8 times this month, and to and from, sometimes with my son who's 8. because, like tonight, the last bus going back to Arbor Heights left 45 minutes ago. On Sundays, it leaves at 5:45. So, church, coming home from church or coming home from dinner during the week or whatever, we have to walk home. Coming home from soccer practice, we have to walk home. Coming home from his teacher meeting last week, we had to walk home because these things get over. And we have the 22 that runs for once an hour. But again, that's the one that ended. And so at this point, there is no bus service to get home from this meeting tonight. I have this. These are the public comments that I have just now that can kind of give you an idea of how people are feeling about it right now. And I think that the Rapid Ride has worked great for me. I've ridden it almost every day this month. It's an extremely fast way for me to get home. The problem is I get to Barton, and that's as far as I can get. And it's this great transit that's so close to our neighborhood, but there's no way for us to get to the transit hub. I feel lucky because I'm only 4 blocks from the 22, so I've been able to take the 22 once home. I took the 22 home once because we happened to catch the last one out. But almost every other night, if you come home on the express, I think twice as much, and the rest I've had to walk home. It's not just. It seems like it's designed for people who are 9 to 5, but it doesn't even work for them. I had a neighbor yesterday who said, "Yeah, I had to stay I had to stay at work a little late last night, and I had to have my husband come down and drive down." There's comments on there about people who are like, "Oh, I just drive and park in other people's streets." I mean, it's already raining. It's already getting cold. I don't see a snow route listed for Arbor Heights on any of those routes. I hope there is one. I actually loved the snow route last year. It was the easiest way for me to get shopping done because every 20 minutes I had something going to Westwood Village. I loved it actually when it snowed because I had the best service to Westwood Village than I have any other time of the year. So if we could get just something that gets us over to Westwood Village later than 7 o'clock at night, that would be just fantastic. And you said there's some reserves, and I just hope there's some room in that reserves for our neighborhood because it's a pretty bad situation. I'm actually really, really worried about next month in December and January and February before the next shakeup. I'm actually really, really worried about safety, about personal safety. There's not a lot of sidewalks. There's a lot of hills. There's not a lot of lights. 106 and 35th is considered accessible. It's a gravel pit with no lights at a 4-way stop. I'm frightened every time I have to cross there at night. It's not a good situation, and I'm really afraid that someone's going to get hit by a car. Someone's going to, we really need to get something back to our hearts as soon as possible. It's a very bad situation, and hopefully there's some room in there to reinstate some of that service.
Thanks, John. You have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Steve Marcus. I live in the neighborhood, and personally, I have a very little complaint. The bike lanes work great for me 6 months a year. I appreciate any improvements that are made to them. I can't really encourage my friends to ride with me because I feel like they're too dangerous for less experienced riders. The other 6 months of the year, I'm close enough to Morgan Junction. I've managed to get a seat on the bus. So this is not about me personally. This is more about my fellow West Seattleites. One of my biggest complaints is, Tom, you alluded to it, the West Seattle blog had more comments about the last 10 days of Metro service, and obviously it's a big concern, but Metro in particular, I have a years-long complaint that you don't respond. This is not personal, and I appreciate your being here tonight, and I consider this a response. However, I have written letters and gotten no response, and I've seen hundreds of people comment on the blog. I think there might have been one response at the end of the first week from Metro. I consider that inadequate. There were people expressing massive frustration. Again, you said you were surprised by the turnout here, and I think you all can feel the tension in the room. And it has to do with Metro's failing on the implementation of this admittedly huge transition, but more importantly, your lack of response to our frustration over the last week. We're trying to be patient. It's hard, but your silence is what's really frustrating. So I think I speak for a lot of people here when I say, and again, this is not you personally, Victor, it has to do with Metro. We would appreciate an apology We're sorry, we didn't plan as well as we should have. We are doing what we can within the constraints that I totally understand budgets and plans can only take you so far. We're doing the best we can to improve them, and I think you are. And we're hearing it tonight, but we didn't hear it for the last 10 days, and the frustration built. You're going to lose riders, which maybe is your goal, but frankly, I doubt it. And I appreciate, Chris, that you were saying Metro people care, and I'm sure they do. They're our neighbors, they're our fellow Seattle citizens. They want things to work as well. We need to hear from them. We need to hear that. We need to hear explanations. And I think it would be appropriate right at this point, we need to hear an apology.
Additional questions? Go ahead.
Can I respond to Steve?
Sure, absolutely.
Steve, I appreciate your comments, and they're very direct. And yes, I do have a responsibility. I'm the manager of Metro's planning division, and the staff who work for me are the staff who plan these changes. I am truly sorry that those changes have not gone as we had planned for them to go. And I am truly sorry that we have left some people at the curb over these first 2 weeks. I think that we have made some efforts at communication over that time, trying to balance communicating with information versus communicating without information. So we put buses back into service to add trips on the second day of service. We started talking about what we would do for Monday at the end of that first week. There was a general message to all transit riders from our general manager saying, thank you for your patience. We know it's not gone smoothly. Second week message went out as well. We provided information to Tracy at the blog, Mike Lindboom at the Seattle Times with respect to questions about ridership. And we have spent every day looking at what are our options, what we can do to alleviate some of the issues and mitigate some of the concerns. Part of that is to figure out which are the concerns that are issues that are underlying in the design and which are caused by lack of familiarity by drivers and riders in those first several days. So we are looking to try to get real information that will tell us what is the condition that we need to mitigate for in the longer term. But we took some immediate actions to try to alleviate the pass-ups and the load issues. We are seeing an increased demand, and there was a surprise. It was that the demand came so quickly. We have seen, as I said earlier, growth in transit demand in this neighborhood for the last 3 years at about 7-8% per year. We would have seen a 10% jump in passenger loads. I would have thought, well, that's very healthy. We saw a 25%. Again, only 4 days of counts. We've been out there morning and afternoon at the viaduct entrances and exits. So we're still gathering that information. We're trying to make it better. And we're doing so with a limited set of resources and with direction to make the resources that we do have as effective, which means carry as many people with each hour of bus service as we can. I would much rather be adding to our system rather than taking from John's neighborhood to put on to 35th Avenue and give that area more frequency. But we're making the best of the resources we have, and we're working hard to try to correct the issues that have arisen in this first couple of weeks.
If I may make just a quick follow-up. With due respect to, again, the constraints and the challenges, and I'm sure you guys are frustrated as well. We live in an age with, thanks to Martin's efforts and tons of other bloggers and West Seattle blog and all, in an age of hyper-communication. We all communicate with each other as if we were at some block party every night, every day. I think Metro needs to be a more consistent part of that conversation. I think everything you're saying, do you read the Seattle Transit blog or anything?
Very regularly.
I mean, there are some smart transit geeks on those blogs, and they will understand everything you're saying here tonight and appreciate what you're dealing with. But you need, and you state it quite well, but I think you need to be a more consistent voice on the West Seattle blog, and Seattle Transit blog, and such as the communications you guys did do at the end of each week. So thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you, Steve.
So you had a question?
I just wanted to respond to Keith and to any of you. If you write a city department, or in this case a county department, because that's what Metro is, and you don't get a response, let me know. Or when you initially write them, just CC me, send me a copy, so that I know that you've asked a department for information or for assistance. Because if you don't get a response, and we watch that, we monitor it to make sure that a department gets back to you quickly. And if you don't, then I'll say, Mr. Desmond or Mr. Hahn, I understand that Keith, was it Keith? It's kind of hard to hear. Stephen, I'm sorry. Anyway, I heard that Stephen wrote you 2 weeks ago. I haven't seen any response yet. What's your response? So that's one job a city council member has, is to make sure departments are responsive. And so feel free to contact us. I hope that you do. Let me know or keep me in the loop.
Tom.Rasmussen at Seattle.gov.
Yeah, just go to there.
Now, your question or comment?
I could segue because I live in Arbor Heights as well. I live at the very southern end of it. I wrote a letter to Metro. They responded. In my letter, I laid out some of the things that John was talking about that were impending, because this was before the changes had occurred. And I also said in my letter that I would be getting signatures from people in my neighborhood, and I hadn't gathered them all at that point. So Metro responded and said, yes, we'll register you as a petition, and please send us the signatures. I have 89 signatures that have been gathered from neighbors, and you can sign it now. There's still some name on here, so if you want to pass it around. I just wanted to iterate. Yeah.
Is your name on there so that we can respond to you?
It is on there. I'll make sure that when I turn it in, it's clear. I'll send it with my letter. On the letter. Yeah, it's on the letter. But I just want to point out that Barton Street is, I think, like, if you were counting streets as numbers, it'd be like 94th. And we live down at like 112th, 114th. That's a long way. I worked. Yeah, and in the dark, and in the rain. I worked at night for a while, and if I had to take Metro now, I would be out of luck. I'd have to walk 25 minutes, 30 minutes to get home. And even if that's just 2 people or 3 people every day, that's 2 people, real people. And so it just seems a shame to cut the service so severely in that neighborhood. So I don't know if there's something that could be worked out with a shuttle, or the shuttle that goes to Westwood Village or something like that, that just transports a few people more regularly. Thank you. Here.
Okay, in the back and then over up there.
I'm Joe Vanina. I'm from Arbor Heights as well. I just saw a bunch of the neighbors nodding their heads when Emily was talking. So can all the people from Arbor Heights stand up? So I just think that's powerful, and you guys are awesome that we're all here, because we've been walking a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll put out there straight. I've only 1 or 2 people. Every time I've walked, I haven't. I mean, the nice thing I haven't been alone. And when I've been alone, sometimes people couple with their bags, and it's not just a couple cases. It's meet little trains so far.
Also, 40% of the residents of that neighborhood are over 50. I mean, there's going to be a lot of aging population to think about that aren't going to want to drive their cars. It's not safe for them. So.
And people are carpool?
Yes.
Yes, our neighbors, yeah.
I wonder if some people may face walking home. Can you carpool? Would some people be willing to take some of their neighbors to Arbor Heights?
Sure, but it has to be the right time.
I've been doing that with a few of my neighbors. We've been driving down to Angela and Joe's and parking there.
That's wonderful. I mean, just what can we do tonight to help folks who might have to be walking?
Immediate.
Just tonight. Yeah, because this meeting goes till 9 o'clock. It'd be a shame that someone has to walk a 1.5 miles or 2 because they attended this meeting. I'd be happy to carpool with someone. I'll drive. I can drive 3 people. I have to throw stuff in my trunk, but I can move it.
So you had a question or a comment?
I have both. My name's Rebecca Rounds. I live here in Walnut Beach, north end of Gilbert Park, and I am so grateful to live in West Seattle. I'm from Dayton, Ohio originally, and I will be returning in November just to be around my family. They're wonderful people, as such as you. I have experienced water taxi. I am a water lover, and most of the time I've been the only person on the boat. I've been the only person on the little shuttle that takes you around West Seattle. My question to you, Victor, is that Metro, these people have nothing to do for about a half an hour. Where I live, Bowman Beach is underutilized in the weekends. It's hard for me to walk up to Fauntleroy, the same as it is for people from Arbor Heights. These people are sitting on their butts reading books, because I've seen them. I'm a county worker. I would love that job. Can we incorporate those little shuttles to broaden the service? Because I've had the occasion of being on them, and they were able to divert me basically to my door. They weren't doing anything else. I think that I'm just a small clog here.
But I have to agree with her. I used to take the water taxi more often because it was more convenient for me to drive down there and get on the water taxi because I lived in Boulevard Park. Now I live on the north end of Lincoln Park, and I'd love to take the water taxi, especially now that we have to deal with rapid ride because I never know when it's going to show up. But I can't. I have to drive all the way down there and park at Alcott, and I feel bad doing that. And if you could get a more regular shuttle through some of those neighborhoods to get to the water taxi, I think you'd see a lot more usage. I mean, just having a shuttle that goes to the junction and just goes to Adams, you're negating an entire population of West Seattle.
It's extended over lunchtime.
I just found that out. I just found out that if they had summer schedule on the shuttle to the morning.
So is that
But
a
I
cost
never
issue?
knew about it.
Yeah, Chris, that's probably yours, since the water taxi.
The water taxi is not actually a Metro service.
Right.
The ferry district.
No.
Yes.
We all work together, don't we?
Yeah.
Let's work together.
If you'll give me a chance, I'll be happy to answer your question. The water taxi has two shuttles. As you pointed out, one goes to Admiral and one goes to the junction. The reason they go that far is, and not further, is because they are trying to meet the boat. The idea is to try and make it as easy as possible for people to use the shuttle to access the boat. The boats are much busier during peak hours. Ridership has gone up every year on the West Seattle water taxi. The executive views that as an important part of the transportation system for West Seattle, but it doesn't work for everybody. I live down near Southwest Library. I can't use the water taxi regularly. Sometimes I use it to go home because I can take the shuttle up to 35th and Avalon where I can go anywhere, But to go too far away from the water taxi, you can't time that shuttle. Currently, the boat doesn't leave until the shuttles are there, and the shuttles don't leave until the boat's there. And that's the way the system's supposed to work. I have asked Victor's staff to go out and see if we could access the park and ride under the West Seattle bridge. I'm not supposed to call it a freeway. The bridge. They tried it, and they found that it was too tight of a turning movement for the shuttle to do safely under the bridge right there. We have looked. We did extend it down to the Morgan Junction during the daytime when there's not as much congestion, and we were able to add that extra time. So it's not for lack of caring. The water taxi itself has its own funding challenges. Currently has a property tax that you probably barely notice on your bill. It was cut by the King County Council in part to deliver more service to Metro to a third of a penny per $1,000 valuation. So you probably pay about less than $3 for the water taxi most of the time. It does have its funding challenges, but we do believe it's an important part of the system. As for Arbor Heights, I'd just like to say I think I know about a third of the people on this list. I have all kinds of friends in Arbor Heights. It is an example of a challenging area in West Seattle. To be honest, the ridership outside of the peak areas is not very strong. And I absolutely realize people whose daily lives depend on that, and I don't think we have the right mix of service. And I think Victor's staff is looking at whether we can improve and restore some of that service to Arbor Heights. But there's not an area in the county that doesn't want more transit service. There are 1.8 million people, almost 2 million people in this county, and every community is clamoring for more transit service. Seattle currently has the vast majority, about 60% of that transit service. So our neighborhoods are used to a higher level of service than a lot of the county. They pay the same taxes that you do. And in fact, it used to be Seattle was the absolute economic driver, but now we've got East Side people who are demanding more service in a huge downtown Bellevue and a huge Microsoft campus. South King County is perhaps one of the strongest transit markets in all of King County. We have to balance a lot of competing needs. I think we can improve on the mix in Arbor Heights, and I think we can try and give people more transit options. But there are tough times and tough financial situations require tough decisions.
Martin, you had a comment?
Yeah, I have a question for the Arbor Heights people. I mean, so there's a real resource limitation here. I mean, they're really deciding who are we going to strand down at the county. But is there, if I understand correctly, the 22 runs hourly down 35th further down?
Yeah, so
But it stops at 7 something, right?
So the 22 starts pretty early in the morning, Monday through Friday.
Right.
It runs, the last Arbor Heights bus leaves this area at 7:05.
Right.
On Saturdays, it doesn't come through Arbor Heights until 9 o'clock, which is and then it only runs until 6:45, leaving the junction, and then on Sundays, 9 o'clock to 5:45.
Okay, I understand. So my question is there a way, so given that there's a finite number of hours dedicated to the service, is there a way that Metro could adjust? Say, for instance, and I don't know anything about Arbor Heights, but for instance, I know the 21X down there is in the morning. What if the 21X was the only thing that ran in the morning, and then the entire 22 shifted to later in the day, so it covered a little more of the evenings? For instance, would that be a helpful change?
Well,
How about daytime?
There's nothing at daytime.
About daytime?
During the day,
Well,
there's
runs
not.
out.
We don't have a buses up there.
The 22 doesn't run in the
No,
daytime?
doesn't come in now.
Well, we do
Monday.
run
It used to be the 21.
It goes down to
21,
106.
there is no 21.
There's no
No
21
21.
anymore.
We don't have a 21 anymore.
Yeah, that's why I'm talking about,
Yeah.
I'm talking about the 22,
Well, may I?
which connects you to the
22 is too far
The
from us.
22 goes down 106 and 35th.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, Arbor Heights continues all the way down, it's not named 114th. I live at 11420.
Okay.
That's
It's
a ways,
equivalent
right?
of 116.
Now, if you go from 35th all the way over to Marine View Drive on 106, it's like 8 blocks?
We don't have a Martin Luther Drive
So,
anymore.
I mean, there's a whole quadrant that's like just, what are you gonna do?
well,
So,
it-
any time of day.
If I could, I thought about the 22 and like, is there a way to do it? One thing would be, yeah, running it later. You know, running it a couple hours later, even if it was just an hour. But one thing too is I don't know how much more time it would take. Is it comes across 106. Keep going down 106 down to Greenview and then do the southern at least the southern part of the loop. That's only going to add like I think probably 8 minutes to that run. I mean that's just one of the many ideas that could be there because that would get people right down the intersection and also hit the tip. I mean one of the reasons like it's a half mile, but it's a very hard half mile to walk with lack of sidewalks and lack of lighting and things like that. I mean that's just like one of many things that could happen.
Yeah, what are you going to do about those sidewalks? No, I'm just kidding.
Right, so my advice is someone who, I just like to say that my advice is someone who's observed this process is you can think of really like revenue neutral ways to improve the service. Like if it's running too early or it's running too late or something like that. Or like if in the morning peak you can use the 21X and then the rest of the day use the 20, or something like that. I'm just brainstorming here. That is especially helpful to Metro. I'll stop now.
So the gentleman in the black sweater, let's get to you. Sorry.
I sympathize with all of Arbor Heights because I live down near there myself. I've got a few questions. I'll make it really fast because Number one is for SDOT. I'm trying to figure out why SDOT and SPU don't work together, because as soon as one paves the street, the other one comes and tears it up, and then the other one comes back and paves it again. So is there any way to just line up the CenturyLink, SPU, and everybody who has stuff running out of the street and say, we're breaking up the street on this date, and then we're closing it. And that's it for the next year. So this is your chance to come in and do it. Because I can't tell you how many pothole rangers I've talked with who've come out 10 or 15 times to my intersection, Odd Roxbury and 46 and 47, to patch things up. And told me, yeah, I've been working for SDOT for 30 years now, and it's the same damn thing every time. And I've called a number of people downtown and said, have you guys ever thought of working together here? Because, you know, there's a drainage problem here, and they can see the water leaking out from the underground springs and so on. And they say, yeah, but, you know, we just come out and patch it up. By the time you work together once, you probably could have saved 10 years worth of money, you know, of people returning all the time. So that's my question to you is, you don't have to answer it now. Then I've got the transit question, and that is, actually, I've got 3 copies. I didn't realize there'd be 5 of you. So I'll drop it off later at the table. But the experience of my son and the exchange student that goes to school with him at Roosevelt, and I'm not here to wag the dog, but just to say that their experience of traveling from the Fauntleroy area up to Roosevelt is kind of typical of anybody who's coming from that neck of the woods and having to transfer downtown and head north. At this point, the Sea Line gets them downtown at a time that they can't catch the connections that they used to be able to make in the tunnel when they travel on the 54. You killed the 133, which is packed on the other side of the hill, and got them from here to the U District in 45 minutes. Now it takes them almost 90 to travel the same distance. They're catching the 116, and they found out that they can't catch the 116 anywhere but the ferry dock at 6:40 in the morning, because if they stand at another 116 stop, the bus doesn't stop there. So that particular morning they had to jump on the Sea Line. They ended up 20 minutes late for school. So basically, to get to the same place at the same time, they have to catch a bus 15 minutes earlier. And one of the things the transit planners forgot was all these people who have to make connections, they didn't change the connections. They just changed the buses on this side. So all the people who go downtown to make connections can't make them anymore at the same time they all used to get up. So now thousands of people here in West Seattle have to change all their morning schedules, move them all back, in order to make the same connections to get to the same places at the same time they did when they had the 54 and the 133 here. And the 56 is another story entirely. I've got friends up in the Admiral District who said, why do I have to get on a bus to go down to the Admiral Junction when I used to be able to get on a bus and go downtown? Now I have to go down and make a transfer in order to get downtown to make a transfer to get where I want to go. So you've added a transfer, you've added a lot of time to the morning. Most people I know don't want to get up that early. They want to sleep in, and particularly teenagers, like the people that come out of my house. So it was a lot easier for my wife to drive on her way to work, drop them off at the 133, zip, they were up in the U District, and they were done with it in 45 minutes. Or if they got on the 54 Express, they'd catch a 60 in front of Macy's, 55 minutes, they were up at Roosevelt. Now, there is no 60 series at all that stops anywhere near 15th and 65th. So their only option is catch a 116 at 6:40 instead of a 133 at 6:55 to get to the same place, but have a little chancy thing about the transfer downtown, because they stood there and watched packed buses go by, and they ended up late for school. My favorite story is the exchange student whom I dropped off before. I picked him up at Roosevelt, drove down to the north end of the bus tunnel, dropped him off at 10 minutes to 6, got back to the U District for my meeting. My phone rings at 20 after 6, it's him on 3rd Avenue. He's walked the whole bus tunnel, and he's come out at 3rd, and he said, I don't know how to get home. I said, well, the Sea Line runs every 10 or 15 minutes at this time of day. He said, the schedule, the screen says there's not a Sea Line until 2025 tonight. I said, well, that can't be. is there a 116? He said, I don't know where to catch the 116. I said, okay, fine. Find any driver you can and say, look, I'm from Germany. I don't know how to get home.
We'll take you to CTAC.
Can you help me, please? And he finally got home about 40 minutes later. From downtown. From downtown. My kids can bicycle the 13 miles to Roosevelt more dependably and more directly than they can on a bus right now. This is, you know, I've heard the stories about constraints and finances and so on, but the service has changed so dramatically that it has made it difficult for everybody else. But there were stories, my son, who took almost 2 hours to get home from Roosevelt that first week. He ended up finding desperate on a 21 at Westwood Village at 10 after 6. He'd left school at about 3:30. And I had to drive over to pick him up because there wasn't any way to get from Westwood Village back home in any kind of time that would be. I mean, he has to do homework, he has to eat dinner, and he has to sleep before he gets back up 15 minutes early to catch that 116. So I'll give you the piece of paper, but I'm just curious about whether we're going to address any of this stuff.
We would like to talk to you further, make sure that the trip, that, is it your son?
Yeah, my son, an exchange student,
is as good as we can make it in terms of what the connections you're trying to make. If your spouse is driving into a park and ride, Olson Myers has a direct route to downtown that may be more convenient for 113. Burien has routes. I understand that's not your entire point, but there may be a better connection to be made.
Well, you guys have got 121, 122 that come from the Burien Transit Center. It's dangerous to walk from the Shag down to Cloverdale, but if there was some way to do that, and the 121 and 122 could stop there, they could pick it up and go straight up 99. But that bus just goes straight down 509.
You have a comment on this?
So we'll get back to your details.
Well, I kind of have a comment because I want to talk about the stops and the way it's coordinated. And I brought a picture tonight. I live on Fauntleroy down by the ferry dock. And a lot of bus stops were taken away. And the bus stop closest to Trenton has no direct sidewalk access. And you took away the bus stops where you have controls, crosswalks. You can push a button and safely cross Fauntleroy. And you touched upon the safety issue too. And I have big concerns that the bus stops weren't coordinated to where people can safely get on and off the bus. You cannot cross Fauntleroy with the ferry traffic the way it is. And so I'd like to see Cloverdale be reactivated so that people can get to and from. Yeah, where is it?
Wolf, and then we'll go up front here.
Hi, I'm an Arbor Heights person too. I have an office in Fremont, and I want to touch on Marty's point. And this is before the rapid ride, but when Mercer kind of opened up, it was like fixed. Buses going across Dexter to Fremont from downtown would just sit there because it's this turn lane, going and coming, in the morning and the evening, coming home. So I was able to put up with an hour and a half. You know, from the 21, if I got the express, I'd be lucky to get the 26 and 28 to Fremont. It's an hour and a half of my day one way, so 3 hours of my day. But I'm a former vice president of this organization. I figured I have to do it. But when I'm sitting, you know, when it goes to an hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5 hours to get home, so I'm talking 3, 4, 5 hours, well not 5, but 4 hours out of my day, that's killer. I can't do that. So it's coming from West Seattle, anywhere else other than downtown is also our little hell.
Okay, you mentioned revenue neutral changes. Well, right now, the 22 shows on Trip Planner that the last trip leaves the junction at 8:05, yet that's not what the riders or the drivers' run schedules show or what it says on the actual schedules. And I brought copies for you. I'll give them. to you after the meeting, but I wrote Metro, and I did hear back. And they said, oh yes, absolutely, we'll do that last run. Well, I have had 4 drivers be really gracious about it, and 1 be just flat out mean and nasty.
Did you get the bus number?
Oh, I've got the time and the date, so.
Yeah, if anytime you have, we have some great drivers, but, they're also made up of people.
Well, right,
So,
and I needed to cool down about the situation too. So give it a few days.
I just want to say, anytime you have a problem with a driver or a bus that doesn't show up or is late, try and get the number that's on the bus and the time and the stop you were at, because that's absolutely critical information. We really do try and follow up on all these issues, and Victor's been taking copious notes, so I've been bothered, so.
Well, I've been a full-time Metro rider for 25 years, and 4 years ago I gave up my car. And now I've bought myself, if I stay downtown later than 6:40, I'm signing up for a half-mile walk home. If I stay any longer than that, I'm signing up for a 1.5 mile walk home.
I live in Arbor Heights too, and my mom's the same way. There's no buses like 9 o'clock in the morning. After that, there's no buses until like 4:30, I think, in the afternoon. So you have nothing in between, and then for her to walk, because we live on 102nd and 42nd, so that's why she has to walk to, what is that, Roxbury, 135th to catch either 21 or 21 or 22.
Okay, so we had a question over here, and then we'll go to the back.
Hi, my name's Mary Sue, and I live in the Admiral area. So we lost the 56, and we lost the circulator bus that went down up 37 through our neighborhood to connect us to things like the rapid ride. So my husband has no problem going to work because he works the regular, business hours. So the 56 works for him both directions, but it doesn't, it stops, the last one that leaves the viewpoint area is right after 9 o'clock in the morning. And there are no more, not even in the evening when they're coming over bringing people. So I work 3 part-time jobs, and the one I used used that bus for was to go downtown, work a retail job where I'm on my feet all day, and I consider myself to be in pretty good shape, but I didn't really sign up for a 2-mile round trip from buses plus standing a full shift on my feet. So my experience with the rapid ride, which I have walked to in Redmond, is it takes me longer to get downtown on the rapid ride, and I think that's true for a whole lot of people here, because it's not coming by our house. It's not coming close enough to our house to be rapid for us. And because of all the funds put into it, you've cut all the services, not all of them, but many of the services that went through the neighborhoods in West Seattle and probably other areas as well. But another thing I've wondered for a long time, when the viaduct is down, ready closed for the weekend, why don't we run the water taxi so people have a way to get in and out of West Seattle other than sit with everybody else trying to get on I-5? I don't know if that's ever been considered, but that it has scheduled closing several times a year, and people still want to go downtown, and they still need, or they need to, people work weekends too, need to get downtown and back. So I would like to throw that out for consideration.
I do want to clarify your comment that rapid ride is paid for by taking away from the other routes. That what we've done is move the resources from Arbor Heights, from Admiral, to other places in the West Seattle and Seattle network. So we've not reduced. It has come from one neighborhood and gone into another neighborhood. So we have moved resources around, but it's not the rapid ride that's done that to take it away. Those are changes, those are the 50 routes to 35th, where we've put 15-minute service all day long.
Alpine has no service, Arbor Heights has no service, the whole route of the 51
So-
now is cut out. What neighborhoods are you
Yeah,
talking about?
so you put it
Because
on the
West
major
Seattle doesn't have service
arterials,
anymore.
but you've
So
taken
an
from the
example
rest.
of that
So
would
we
be
have-
Gatewood has twice the service it used to have.
We have put service on the major arterials, and more service on major arterials, rather than spreading it to all of the neighborhoods.
But we live in all the neighborhoods.
Understood. I know that what I say doesn't help you because you've lost your trip. That resource has gone to provide other people service, and more people that have used it in those neighborhoods.
So what
And
I, and I'm sure
that's
many
the
other
sorts of
people
changes
will be doing, is the weather turns worse all the time. And it's really dark when you're coming home. I'll be driving and parking in front of somebody's house so I can catch a bus, but I used to be able to walk down the street safely and back to catch. And I think we're hearing that from a lot of
At
others.
the end of the day,
And not
people can
everybody
sell
has the
themselves.
option of having a car that they can do that with.
Okay, Andy, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, it's a little both. I don't live in Arbor Heights. I'm one of the people who actually, my bus service has probably improved because I live on 37th near Myrtle Reservoir. So the 21 is gotten better, the 21X has gotten worse. But I can change to a rapid ride down by the KFC, and so I have no personal problem with that model change. Yes. But I've been listening to the very legitimate challenges other people face, and it reminded me of something we talked about in this organization several years ago, which was the desire, and also I've heard in this room tonight, the desire for circulator buses. And I'm thinking, we have those shuttles that take people to the water taxi. That same idea could serve Arbor Heights much better by connecting not to the water taxi, but to either the Rapid Ride or the 21 that connects people to the trunk lines. Certainly that's the idea behind the Rapid Ride, is that it collects people from a big watershed. But if you're a mile and a half from the watershed, you're a stranded sandwich. And a circulator bus that never leaves West Seattle, except to go to bed at night, could serve the neighborhood much better and much more reliably, and would be the right size. You don't need an accordion bus running through Arbor Heights. You don't even need a full-size bus. One of those small shuttle buses could run through every 15, 20 minutes.
Even every half hour.
Every half hour.
Every hour.
Right.
No, let's go half an hour.
We could have you still have to pay the driver, so it's not free, but maybe we could reduce the big buses running infrequently and have a small bus running more frequently and over more hours.
So what I would like to say, and I'd like to go absolutely on record, we would rather be adding service to these neighborhoods than moving service around from one neighborhood to another. We believe that we have transit demand for more service to be used in the city of Seattle in many neighborhoods across the city. We don't have the resources to do that. And what the challenge that I've been given is to have more people use our transit system without having more resources to put out new services, but to reorganize the services that we have. It's a significant challenge. But I believe we would be putting more people on buses if we had more buses to put them on. Circulators do cost money. There is a driver, there is a vehicle. It's not marginally very different from a 60-foot bus when you look at its total cost. And what attracts people and what provides good service is not service that runs from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'm not going to argue that that's a wonderful service. But what attracts use and runs every 30 minutes has a significant cost to it. And we've simply moved those 30-minute services from places where they were not used as much to places where they've been used much more heavily and will be used much more heavily. And I wish that wasn't
That's not
That
true.
wasn't the.
Okay.
What about Route
Amanda,
133? That was
Amanda.
always packed. What
Amanda.
about Route 133? Answer the question. What about Route 133?
The Route 133.
You cut a packed bus.
The Route 133, on average, cost us about $7.80 per rider. On average, our system across the entire county costs us about $4 per hour. It was carrying about 17 riders per hour. And if you look across the services that serve downtown Seattle and the University District, it was in the bottom 25% in terms of the numbers of people it carried per hour. And those are the reasons, with a full bus or with near full buses, traveling a long distance, those buses then travel back a long distance completely empty. And that's the half of the equation that makes that.
They're not empty when they return.
That's what we do is we put them on places like 35th and the C line where they do get used in both directions all day long. Because there is not a place to put all those trips that end in the U District and send them out to fill up with people. They end up being empty on the reverse trip. And that's the piece that the riders of that service don't see because they're sitting on the bus when it's full. But it is a costly service to provide.
I'm going to ask for non-Arbor Heights questions.
I got one.
Okay. And then Deb and Steve.
Mine is just kind of a broad philosophical observation. I've spent some time traveling in other countries. And one in particular, I remember spending a week in Cuernavaca and getting around there. And it's a completely different type of approach, but it's very small buses with no frills, but they were everywhere. You know, and you knew when you went out to get somewhere that you could walk somewhere and get a bus, and it could almost go. You know, that system. You knew that you wouldn't be waiting just because there were so many buses, and it's just people have it's a less automobile-centric society. But I think the future is going to ask of us a lot of flexibility, rapidly changing. We've got climate change, we've got financing issues and debt issues around the world. We've got energy issues with oil and natural gas. And I think that I see kind of a singular large bus approach to this system. I mean, just in scale, like the scales of these buses, and very few of these circulator buses or water taxis type scale buses. And I think we would be better served in the future with really making these robust through routes and then having within neighborhoods very robust systems of circulator buses that would allow people to live in our city. And Seattle is where you can really leverage this ability to not have cars. Because there are a lot of people in this room actually who sold a car or don't own a car and want to live that way. If we want to build a type of world-class city that allows us to live without automobiles, and kind of reach those climate objectives for our children, and just live in a place that's not so auto-dominated, I think we need to think outside the box and have a lot of different scales of systems and nested systems, that bus shouldn't all go back to downtown or one or two spots at night. Maybe there's places within neighborhoods that they can go back to that are, so we're thinking about fuel efficiency and different scales. That's just an observation. I don't know whether Metro's thinking that way in the future in terms of costs or types of buses.
I think the key part of that equation is that to become a less car-centric city, neighborhood, society, we have to decide to take the resources that we spend on our cars and spend them on the public transportation system. It may or may not be as much if we have the economies of scale of carrying more people that we spend on our individual transportation, but it takes real resource to provide that type of system. It's not for lack of ideas, and Martin and his cohorts are wonderful at identifying ideas and ways in which services can be delivered better than they are today. I have many people on my staff who are similarly inclined. You need a resource to be able to do that. And what we've done is try to take the resource that we have and make the most use of it that we can.
Well, look, the observation, just real quick, the observation might be
We have some other questions, so let's move on.
Can I respond to that briefly?
Go ahead and respond.
So, I mean, your vision is an attractive one, and in fact, I would argue that what Metro is doing is exactly what you said, having these very frequent services that run all the time, But obviously you can't blanket the entire street grid of Seattle with that service, really at any level of funding. So what they're doing is they're focusing on these corridors where lots of people live, or people who don't want to have a car, can know to move to, and they're developing these frequent corridors everywhere. And unfortunately, in a constrained funding environment, that has a downside. I mean, there are neighborhoods that are not going to be those designated corridors. But if you're interested in that vision, the only way to do it is to to focus service in dense corridors where you have buses running all the time. And that's not I don't want to say it's a stated policy goal of Metro, because I don't think it is. But it is one of the things that informs doing things like making the 21 every 15 minutes instead of every 30, which takes resources.
Two in the back and then one up front here. So Deb and then Cindy.
Hi, I'm Deb Barker. I'm in the Morgan Community Association, Morgan Community, and we've got Rapid Ride, and someday I'm sure we'll all be talking about C-curves to make sure that people who are ducking around the Rapid Ride buses that are loading as quickly as they can don't go into opposing lanes. When that comes, you heard it at a Morgan Community Association meeting first about 6 months ago, and we were going, heads up, heads up. My question, completely different than that. It's about funding. And I just retired from the city of Federal Way after 21 years as a land use planner there. And interesting working at a new city, and everyone gets to do everything. I work very closely with the transportation folks and the engineers and the parks department, and decided I wanted to be a transportation geek. I learned the words traffic impact analysis, traffic impact mitigation, traffic impact fees. And maybe you know, or maybe you don't know, and Tracy, this is where I have to go back to you. We've got, at my count, 3 projects under construction, if you count the one down the block that has permits, good to go. 2 that are planned, we have 2 under construction, 1 almost ready to be under construction, and some others here. Granted, they're in our urban area, in our core. Some of them are on the Rapid Ride line and still want to have 1.7 parking stalls per unit. But you're talking about how lousy stuff is now. Did any of these projects in any of these units and any of these retailers, is there any way to obtain money from them, either now or any of these new projects that take down this building or that building and build a 7-story building with retail on the bottom and apartments above? Are there ways to acquire funding for the future, for the city, of course, and maybe taxing in on Metro? Are there ways to acquire funding through those methods? Traffic impact fees. Does the city of Seattle do traffic impact fees?
No, there is, and I don't know that it'll raise enough money. So, it's a little funny. But I've worked in suburban communities and counties, and there are transportation mitigation, traffic mitigation fees. So they're clearly enabling legislation for the state that any city or county can use in order to create such fees. It's a very long and complicated story, and I will not take up this. They're probably the fact that the city doesn't have these. There's a huge, long history behind it that predates me, so I can't give you a real fast answer, other than to do so would be very, very cumbersome. I would also say that new developments, whether they be smallish that are in your neighborhood or Amazon, when they come to us and they go through a permitting process, there is clearly a host of benefits, improvements, and impact mitigation that they have to do. It's just not as simple as I'm going to have 20 employees or 2,000 square feet, I will pay X dollars per square foot, and so on. But they will have to do numerous other things related to mitigating whatever impact their traffic will bring to that particular neighborhood or area. So we do that.
I mean, we've got our mitigation set. Maybe the
But there has to be a relationship between how you collect those, and that's the complicated part of the story I don't want to do. I don't want you to think that they automatically get off scot-free, but it's not a simple computation that I'm used to in my previous job, where 100 units, I can look it up, 100 units times X dollars per unit, I get this much. I would also add that the order of magnitude of money that you get and the way it's distributed geographically does not necessarily give you a threshold that's going to solve everything that was discussed tonight. I will also say that depending on how you do it, may or may not result in some of those payments being to transit. The more progressive communities make it so it's also for transit, and it's not just for roads. Obviously here, we don't build a lot of roads, so making it for roads wouldn't really do a lot for you. So in summary, it's probably something that's been talked about over the years. There are probably good reasons why it's not done, but it's not like people, developers, get away with nothing and they just kind of skate for free. It's not nearly that simple.
In the larger developments like downtown, we do everything we can to encourage them to pay for bus passes for their employees, so that they impact the streets less. And some of the, most of the employers who are building downtown are doing that. I mean, I think Amazon is going to be offering all of their employees, 12,000 of them, within about 3 or 4 years, all of them bus passes. But still, Amazon is going to be building thousands of parking spots within their new buildings. And I said, do you have to do that? Because it's going to mean a lot more people driving and more congestion. And they said, we have to because our clients expect that, our employees expect that. And if we ever sell those buildings, you have to have parking spots in that building or no one's going to buy it. So we have a long ways to go to change the mentality of people who buy and sell and build major buildings. But we do all we can to encourage people to find alternatives to automobiles, building parking stalls, to contribute to transit rather than encouraging people to drive more.
Cindy? So I'm going to go back to the topic of circulators. I mean, ever since we did urban village planning here, circulators have come up. Are you guys open to a public-private partnership? Because I was thinking about that. I mean, I was going, God, if I was retired now, I mean, I'd go buy one of those hybrids and I could run circulators, you know, in the neighborhood. And then I got to thinking, well, that means I'd have to, you know, figure out how to use their bus stop. Would they let me do that? But if West Seattle said, that's what we really want to do, and we approached one of the taxi companies and said, could you do this? Could you use those little vans you've got? Would you guys be open to that?
You bet we're open to public-private partnerships. We've had several of them. We still have several of them. We work very closely with Microsoft on their connector, for example, as does the city in providing space for them. We have partnerships with Children's Hospital. We have partnerships throughout the county. I want to also say that we are looking at alternative service deliveries. We're primarily working on a work program right now that's primarily aimed at rural areas because they're very expensive to serve with fixed route buses. And looking at improving the service to rural areas around King County by looking at alternative services. And one of the things we heard in that process was that there are a lot of urban neighborhoods that could use a circulator too. So
you could work the union issues and,
well, we have challenges in that. We are limited under contract with the ATU to only a certain amount of service, but we are looking at alternative services. We want to. All those things are renegotiable every time a contract comes up. But I also want to say, every transit agency in America struggles between two poles where they, and one is coverage. Is that the highest value to serve as many neighborhoods as possible and as many areas as possible? And productivity. Is the goal to serve the most people for the tax dollar? And that's the struggle. We may not have the mix right, and that's where alternative services can help address coverage needs and keep our system as productive as possible.
Okay.
And we've really encouraged Metro to do that, particularly in their rural areas. But the most recent example is when the free ride zone ended at the beginning of the month. There is an alternative service being offered now that is free, but of course we pay for it, but it's free to the riders. There's a circulator downtown now that stops at designated locations. It's being run by Solid Ground, a nonprofit provider that has vans. I thought that there are churches, there are senior centers that have vans. Why don't we look at whether or not those vans would be available at times, because they're not always driving people around. Some may only work on weekends, who knows? So contracting with them, and such as what you're talking about, Cindy, may be cost effective in neighborhoods. I hear the same thing from the folks on Queen Anne. They have church vans, they have community vans around there. Why don't they provide direct connections to the metro routes?
I will also say we have a huge alternative service in our van pool program. We have the largest van pool program in the country, I believe. And something like almost 10,000 van pools?
1,200.
1,200? No. 1,200.
Hi, my name is Ben. My family and I live in the Morgan Junction area, so not Harbor Heights, but I feel your pain. I just want to talk about capacity on the buses, on the rapid ride buses. We're fortunate to live on the corridor. We live just a half block off California, so we benefit, but my travel time has increased. So I don't feel that benefit. I understand I should, but I don't. I've noticed that the buses are very, very full. I keep pretty regular commuting hours, so I'm on in the mornings and off in the afternoon. But I see the buses packed. Routinely, I'm not able to get a bus home. Sometimes 2 buses will come. And it's frustrating for me, but I'm able-bodied. I can get on, I can push my way on, I can stand for the ride. I see a lot of people who have a lot of trouble on those buses. And I see guys, I see men and women in wheelchairs waiting for buses, and they'll say, just pass me by, I can't get on, pass me by. I see people who have trouble standing. I see pregnant women who I think would probably get a seat if people could see that there was a pregnant woman standing right in front of them, but they can't even see her because there are so many other people standing in front of her. She can't get to the driver to ask for a seat. I mean, it's ridiculous how packed these buses are. And so I understand you've added buses to the routes, but it seems like it's not enough. And it seems like things aren't better yet. And I'm having a hard time saving face in front of my friends who I'm trying to advocate transit in front of. I've taken metro buses for 12 years, and I've always benefited from the service. And I feel like now I'm starting to not be able to advocate in front of my friends for transit services anymore. So the capacity is just what I wanted to mention there. The overfull buses are a big problem.
Thanks for writing, number one. We are working hard to make our service more regular so that the buses are coming every 10 minutes and not 2 at one time and they're not 20 minutes. So we are having difficulty with that in the first few weeks. We're working closely with SDOT to ensure that all the priority that is planned to go on these 2 lines is fully implemented. We still have a ways to go with signal priority on the B line. That has affected some of the C line. One of the advantages that we've had is because Rapid Ride does not have a published schedule, so we don't have timetables in people's hands, we're able to make changes so we could add those 2 trips without having to tell people exactly what time they were supposed to come, and we can make further adjustments. And we expect, as we have some experience with our operators, as we more fully implement the transit priority measures with SDOT, that those runs will become more reliably timed and we'll fine-tune it. It is not right now, and that's a big concern for us. And those buses coming kind of off schedule creates a lot of those crowding conditions. Very crowded bus followed by a fairly empty bus is what happens when we get too close together.
Yeah, sometimes 3 or 4 really crowded buses.
Yeah.
Last Friday, I had 3 buses, and I was standing room only on the 3rd one, right after one after the other.
And the tracker system it's so far out of whack now.
What is the tracker? Are we going to get a tracker?
We have GPS bus away. Are you using one bus away?
One bus away does not exist for the city.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't, and neither does Metro Tracker. I looked at Metro Tracker today at 5 o'clock, and it said that, okay, there was one at 5:10, one at 5:25, one at 5:35. Those all left at 4:15, 4:25, 4:35. So Metro Tracker does, or one bus away has already said, it says on their website, I looked at it today, there is a lack of communication between Metro and one bus away. They don't get, there's not the right information. We're GPS tracking now on the buses, correct?
And those are data download communications, not that we're not talking.
So is there
Well,
another system?
so their data, I mean, are we going to get a tracking system?
We expect to, because we've had 2 years of it working on the A and B lines. And we've run into a problem with the service change. Excuse me?
The tracker used to work on the 54, one bus away used to work on the 54.
Yes, and it's working on other systems. We've had a problem with the C and B line as we've implemented.
No,
And
you've got
both we and one
problems,
bus away.
you've got problems all over the
Resolve
city
that.
with that tracker system. It doesn't work.
And downtown, coming home, I changed my schedule recently, the C line is totally unreliable for coming home. I come home at 2 o'clock now, I have to wait 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and one bus finally comes and it's so full because nobody's seen a bus in 30 minutes.
Okay,
How
so
is the system?
we have a few moments left. This gentleman's been waiting for a while. I live in Arbor Heights, and fortunately, I don't depend on the 21. So I'm sorry for you guys. I feel sorry for you. But the 21 for me, for the past 14 years of my life, and I've lived in Seattle, in Arbor Heights, is a convenience. And it's a real nice convenience. I want to leave my car at home and go downtown at night. Maybe I'm coming back from a show or something downtown. Avoid the parking hassles, take the water taxi across. 21's there to take me home. But not just in Arbor Heights. If you're going to want to make somebody, I mean, I know the goal is to get people out of their cars. And if you want to get people out of their cars, you've got to show them a system that can be reliable, that they can depend on. Gee, the bus stops by my house, I'll take the bus. Well, if there's no bus, you're never going to make me believe it. And then one more point to make. Today, I had nothing better to do, so I drove around the Arbor Heights Loop, and there's 25, might be 26, but there's 25 brand spanking new bus stop signs. Why did you guys need to spend the money for that? Brand new signs that were put in just before the cutback in services. I think all the regular riders that are getting service in the mornings and the evenings know where the stops are. So that's a lot of money to put in state.
Why do we need new bus shelters?
Exactly, that's another one, yeah. Why do we have to do these new shelters? Yeah,
So-
why show up?
Calm down. As moderator, I get to ask one question. We have about one question left. I took the C/D line the other day from Westwood Village to 100th and Holman, which is a new stop for me, but it's an awesome new QFC if you ever take the line to the end of the line. Very convenient for the bus riders because they've got something at either end for a snack, which is good. No, I'm serious, it is good. It is good. These are hard and I noticed the following. The downtown stops with no off-board pass are eating your dwell time for lunch. I mean, I was 4 minutes at Pine and 3rd, even with, 6 county cops ferreting people on the bus. And this was at noon, okay, at noon. So it's fairly well packed till you get downtown, then it empties, then it jams at 3rd and Pine, and then it half empties at Uptown. And then, you've got coming and going along 15th, and then when you get to 15th Northwest in Ballard, it basically is like it used to be the old 15. People get on, they get off, et cetera, et cetera. The thing I noticed is that Ballard has absolutely none of the infrastructure that would make it rapid. There's no bulb outs, most of the signs don't work, there's no card readers, or the card readers installed have red signs on them. In fact, there are some stations that aren't even built. I was astonished, frankly, that you would roll out the D line under those circumstances based on having delayed the C line for a whole year because of the impact of the viaduct. So explain, I guess, when Metro will actually get the rapid ride line running to the promises that you made both communities 2 years ago. When will one bus away work? When will it be reliable enough that when it says every 15 minutes, it actually will be every 15 minutes?
I didn't have a chance.
That's why it's the last question.
The 6 lines of rapid ride will cost us about $180 million for passenger facilities, communications, real-time signs, orca readers, and buses. We will get about $125 million from federal and state grants to pay a significant amount of that cost. Most of that grant funds that are eligible for this type of a project, not eligible for other uses in the transit system. So much of the investment that we're making is an incremental investment. It's not a full new cost. And a good part of that is being reimbursed by the federal government. We have had success in implementing our A and B lines. And we have 6 corridors that are arterial environments that differ from one another. And on some of them, like Pack Highway South, we have almost, on the entire corridor, there's HOV lanes that have been built over the last decade for another $150 million by the 6 jurisdictions in that area. On Aurora Avenue South, we have business access, right turns allowed in the driveways, and transit lanes that can go through intersections that are available to us at peak times in peak directions. So part of the day they're available to us. And on other arterial corridors, we have running in mixed traffic with things behind the scenes to signal priority at intersections that riders don't necessarily see, but they should experience. We've had what appears to be a lot of time to implement rapid ride, and yet many of these pieces of it are complex. We've successfully worked with One Bus Away for many years, delivering information to people every morning. And we do have a communications and data issue with our rapid ride line that we have not fixed yet. Chaz, I'd like to say it's going to be fixed tomorrow. I don't know when that will be fixed. We have a work program with SDOT to continue the implementation of all the priority that is planned. But we went into this knowing that there are some portions of these corridors that will be running in mixed traffic that don't have priority. We're looking for other parts of the corridor to give us an advantage. This is a very complex environment in Seattle, and our C and D lines, we intentionally timed not to be the first 2 lines because we know Seattle's a more complicated environment than Pacific Highway South. Not necessarily more complicated than the Bellevue-Redmond corridor, but in terms of overall traffic and demand and expectations for transit, it is much higher. We do service changes 3 times a year, and those dates come, and we have to implement or not implement. So when we are, and we start that 6 months in advance. A year in advance of the C and D line, our council decided that and directed us to eliminate the ride-free area in downtown Seattle. Prior to that, well, we knew we had technical and construction challenges to put Orca readers at the sidewalk stops. We also knew at that time that we had a ride-free area where everybody just got on and off. As of a year ago, we knew we were no longer going to have it. Next year, we will have Orca readers at those stops. So we're implementing Rapid Ride to make incremental, in some places, large steps forward, in other places, small steps forward. And we're implementing it over time, and we're implementing it as we can. And it represents a gradual upgrade of services on these corridors. We need to put more service on this corridor. We're seeing demand with every hour of service we add to these major corridors in West Seattle. We are seeing riders move to transit. And then we're being overwhelmed with riders today. And we're being overwhelmed in part because we're not delivering it as we've designed it to be delivered. We want those buses to be there every 10 minutes. The purpose of having 2 extra buses in the peak period is to be able to insert that when we get behind schedule. And we're still getting better at doing that. A year from now, I hope to be able to report, and I hope to be hearing from people in West Seattle that things are working better for them. Despite what we're hearing at this meeting tonight, I am hearing from others that Rapid Ride is working for them, and they're thanking for us for some of the changes that we've made. People who benefit from the change and who appreciate and see advances in their service don't necessarily, they're not motivated to come to a meeting on a rainy Monday night to tell us about how it's working for them, but we are hearing from people that it is working for them. I'm not a presidential candidate or a candidate for anything, Chaz. To put specific dates on where we're going to be just right, I'm not able to do that. But I can commit that we're working to make it better. We're doing that every day. That it pains us to have to take away service from some communities, to move it to others, or more people will use it. There was a comment earlier, I don't know if Steve is still here, I think he's had to leave, that he didn't hear a response from us. My name, I think, is correctly spelled here. My email address, victor.obeso@kingcounty.gov. I have my business cards here if you'd like to take one. We do respond to letters and emails that we receive. If you call or write to our customer assistance office, you have to specifically request that you have a response sent to you. Otherwise, it's information that we take in to help us plan the system, but you do have to make a request to go to our customer assistance office. We are attempting to be responsive to the issues we have. We've heard from a large contingent from Arbor Heights tonight. We are going to continue to look at ways that we can modify the service that's there to give you more than you have today. I can't promise you that it's going to be all that you want, and I don't believe it's going to be what you used to have. But I can promise you that we're still working on that issue, and we're still working on the other issues that have been raised to us tonight.
Thank you. Would you all be willing to hang around for a few minutes to take individual comments? Okay, let's do it that way. I'm trying to get everybody out at time, so hang around. Thank you all.